So in this video, I'm going to be ranking the 15 most commonly used YouTube strategies by some of the biggest creators in the business space. These are the same strategies that they're using to maximize the revenue that they generate for products like courses, coaching, mentorship programs, and even digital products. And I'm not just going to be ranking these strategies on their reach, I'll also be ranking them on their selling power, so the ability to make money for your business, and their simplicity, so how easy it is to create or produce these YouTube videos. So the first strategy that we'll be looking at is the raw content style. This is one that has been recently popularized with people like William Brown, but also commonly used by people like Tai Lopez or even Sam Sulek in the fitness space. Now, as you might expect, this content style is widely characterized by having no real thumbnail, a pretty basic title, and generally an unedited, unscripted YouTube video. Now, the reason that I've spoken about this one first is because it's extremely popular with new creators because it seems so easy to create. But the problem is that I would only recommend this for people who have existing authority. For example, this video by Will specifically did so well because of the fact that he managed to make $16.4 million, not because having no thumbnail, a basic title, and no editing is actually a good strategy. And so the key with this style of content is to already have an established personal brand, have solid speaking skills to retain someone's attention, an extremely strong title, or in some people's cases, you will just get lucky. So when it comes to the raw format, the reach is extremely variable. The selling power is okay because it allows you to build a bit more of a parasocial relationship, but for simplicity, it is fantastic. So whilst it's not something I would typically recommend to a client, it's something that you can try, especially if you have the personality for it, or you're just getting started with YouTube. Secondly, we have the live breakdown. So in these kinds of videos, they're generally similar to the raw style in that they're often unscripted, but there is a little more structure to them. You can see with creators like Charlie Morgan that there is generally a core idea or principle that drives the rest of the video, and this is the same for someone like Mark Bill's brands. In TJR's case, this is much more of a live demonstration where things haven't necessarily been planned, but the content is still very intentional. This is a format in which he can actually educate people on his skill of day trading without it needing to be overly edited or overly scripted. And so the live breakdown content caters to a very specific type of viewer who is looking more for a breakdown of a system, a strategy, or a method. So I would recommend this strategy for anyone who has processes or specific methods that can be easily demonstrated through a screen share. And the key to making this work is using frequent visual intrigue. So you'll notice with each of these videos, especially the ones that perform well, is that they always have something happening on the screen. So when it comes to the live breakdown format, the reach on these can actually be really solid, especially if you're demonstrating something that people find valuable and entertaining. The selling power is very impressive because you seem more trustworthy and more authentic. And these videos are obviously very simple to make. So honestly, if you can crack this, then you might as well just buy your Lambo. So third on the list is the vlogging style. This is one that's been really popularized by Daniel Dalen, and you've seen so many people copying these kinds of thumbnails with the POV. Then you've got people that attract a younger audience like Brez Scales, who are demonstrating wealth and basically having fun with their boys. People like Mike Thurston, who are basically influencers at this point. And then there are creators like Natalie that are trying to attract a mature audience, and so will speak more about how they're structuring their day, their reasoning for structuring their day, and the kind of high status things that they get up to. Now, I would highly recommend this style of content to anyone who runs a business that sells a lifestyle. So this is typically going to be people that are selling courses or coaching programs or mentorship to beginners or to people in the consumer market. I wouldn't recommend this for anyone in the B2B space unless they're done very tastefully. Now, the key to making this content really work is having an interesting life. And that sounds like a joke, but I genuinely mean it. The biggest reason that people try and copy someone like Daniel Dalen and see no success is because their lives simply aren't interesting enough for people to consistently watch. So in terms of reach, vlogs are really good at attracting a more unsophisticated audience. But in terms of their selling power, there's basically zero unless you're selling a course on how to make money online. And in terms of their simplicity, they're actually a lot of work. So for 99% of people, unless you're selling a very, very B2C offer, I wouldn't get your hopes up with this. So strategy 4 is the classic free course video. This is pretty much the go-to for anyone that is selling a coaching program, mentorship, courses, etc. But there's a reason that it's been done so many times by so many different creators. It's because it's unbelievably effective. As long as you have significant results, whether it's building a personal brand, whether it's building a clothing brand, whether it's drop shipping, whether it's property, you can pretty much make a course about anything. And once you have produced a large free course video that's hours long, you can now direct all of your YouTube traffic towards that video so that you end up with an evergreen sales asset that books calls or generates sales for your business on autopilot. And so the key with making a large video like this is giving someone an A to Z or A to Z roadmap, which many times for info business owners is recreating or even releasing the existing course content that you have in your paid products. But something that I think is always important is to contextualize the information. So rather than just putting 11 hours of Loom videos together, you should try and divide things up into chapters where you'll have a talking head section to introduce each part. So with the classic free course video, the reach is generally extremely strong, especially when the video, the thumbnail and the title are done properly. The selling power is extremely high. The only downside is that it's not as simple as other videos, but the only reason that I wouldn't put it in the top tier is depending on the niche that you're operating in, a free course might not be particularly effective. So strategy 5 is making docu style videos. So what you'll notice with these kinds of highly produced videos is that they tend to mimic what you might actually see on TV or on a Netflix show. So they'll generally be super well produced, the scripts will flow very well, the visuals, the B-roll, the interviews, they're all put together extremely well, as if a production company has actually managed them. So you see this style a lot with Jeff Nippard, where he'll be documenting a specific experiment or a journey that he went on, or someone like Cody Sanchez, whose content actually feels very similar to an entertainment channel like Mr. Beast, except the context is very business focused. Or in the case of channels like WOP or even Simon Squibb, you can see how they use this documentary style storytelling to document the successes of the people either using their platform, using their services, or taking their advice. So for your business, you can leverage this documentary style in order to actually use it for your case studies. Now the key with creating this kind of content is combining the voiceover in the past tense, which helps you tell the story and add context, and the live footage. And the purpose of that is to really show emotions. So you'll get people's reactions, you'll get people's interactions. Now in this content style as well, you're also going to be abusing payoffs. So payoffs can come in the form of teasers, of checklists, of progression loops, of versus scenarios, and so on. So because of the high production value of this docu-style content, it tends to get extremely good reach and often attracts audiences outside of your core audience. The selling power is extremely strong, especially if you're using it to document a specific case study. For example, in your coaching program, you bring on one of your students to talk about their success. And then the only downside to this is the simplicity. Generally, you're going to need a full content team, you're going to need a lot of planning, you'll need some good equipment, and you'll need some good editing. And then there's a lot of work in the post-production in terms of the voiceover and structuring the video. So I would say because of the difficulty to actually create this kind of content, I'm only going to put it in proven to print. But if you do have a content team available to you and you know what you're doing, then I'd probably say that it's top tier. So strategy number 6 is the whiteboard strategy. This involves creating videos, maybe even videos like mine, where you build out a whiteboard either live on the video or you've already built out the diagram and then you talk through it and explain the concepts within that video. So someone that made this super popular is Sam Ovens with the literal whiteboard. There are plenty of other creators that will use virtual whiteboards just like me. Now, despite the fact that this seems like an attractive style, because it's very easy to just talk through a diagram, plenty of people slip up on this because they end up applying it to the wrong videos and to the wrong niches. I'd only recommend making these kinds of videos if you are able to explain complex systems and concepts within your content, and only if the ideal clients that you're targeting are actually receptive to this style. Now, the key with making a whiteboard video engaging is to include visual interaction. So you can see I'm literally using a pen, I'm moving around on the whiteboard. It's not as visually boring as some other videos. And there also has to be an explanation. So the whiteboard should be facilitating your explanation of your points rather than you simply regurgitating what is on the screen. So obviously I'm going to be a little bit biased, but I think the whiteboard videos tend to do relatively well for reach. It does kind of depend on how saturated the whiteboard videos are in your niche, and of course the behavior of your ICP. In terms of selling power, whiteboard videos tend to be very strong because they have that authentic and raw feel whilst also delivering a much more structured message and explaining specific systems or concepts. And then in terms of simplicity, they're definitely not as simple as something like a raw video, but they don't exactly require fancy equipment or a massive content team in order to create good videos. And if you are able to crack this style of content, then it's definitely proven to print. footprint. And there's definitely an argument that it could also be S tier, so I'll just leave it halfway between for now. So strategy 7 is the cinematic video style. So this is always characterized by people using fancy cameras, fancy equipment, all sorts of crazy color grades. Now the thing is, I would only recommend that you make cinematic videos if you sell content. So if you are a content coach, if you help people go viral, if you help people build a brand, then I think this is a great style to go for. But if you're someone that doesn't actually sell content creation or branding or anything like that, even remotely, then a lot of the time this is just a distraction. So the key with making content like this that actually works is taking one of two routes. So you should either use it to develop an extremely strong personal connection or parasocial relationship with the viewer, and the alternative is coming at it with extreme authority. So that's when you would document your life extremely cinematically, like someone like Iman Gadzi might do. So just my personal opinion, but I wouldn't encourage a client to really go out and make super cinematic content. It tends to get lower reach, and you see this on short form platforms too. Its selling power is generally relatively low because you're either talking about something introspective or you're putting yourself on a pedestal, but you're not really giving any value, and they're really not simple to make. So in my opinion, unless it ties very well into the thing that you sell, it's probably not worth it at all to make any content like this. So strategy 8 is going with the talking head video. Regardless of what happens with the YouTube algorithm, this will always be a staple, and there's an extreme amount of flexibility when it comes to this style. As you can see here with some of the examples that I've given, you can pretty much just talk about anything, whether it's your experience, whether you're giving advice, whether you're doing a listicle video, whether you're doing a how-to, whether you're creating a motivational video. And so I recommend it to absolutely anyone that gives value or gives advice or even talks about their own experiences that people might find valuable. Now this style might actually require more editing than any other strategy that I'll talk about in this video, and the key with the editing is to make sure that it facilitates the viewer's understanding rather than detracting from it. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see with a talking head style video is that people actually over edit the video to the point that it's just annoying to watch, and it becomes really difficult to follow the point that's being made. And you need to remember that no matter how much editing you do, that won't save a bad idea, a bad delivery, or a bad script. So for talking heads, the reach is generally really solid. The selling power can be really good depending on the level of detail that you go into, and they're actually pretty simple to make as the creator. If you have an editor or a content team, it really doesn't require that much work on your side. So I'm going to say as long as the value is there and you're not creating some GPT script that has nothing but fluff in it, then I'm going to say the talking head videos will help you buy your Lambo. So number 9 is the faceless style of content. We often see these in the editing space or the AI space, and it's obviously characterized by very heavy editing, a voiceover, which oftentimes is AI, and not showing a face. And so consequentially, these aren't really personal brands. So I'd only really recommend this if you do create tutorials, especially in this kind of space. And 99% of the time to make this content work, you need extremely good editing, you need very strong delivery, which oftentimes, like I said, is done by AI, and you need a really solid script. So with faceless content, sometimes it can get good reach. In terms of reaching your ideal clients though, probably pretty bad. The selling power is definitely lower because you're not showing your face, so it's harder to build trust, and they're really difficult to make because you need loads of editing, loads of scripting, maybe even using an AI voice. So generally speaking, I would say this is a waste of time. So strategy number 10 is an absolute classic, the organic VSL. So Iman's organic VSL is the best example basically in YouTube history of a VSL or a video sales letter, and rather than hosting it on a landing page like a traditional VSL, he just uploaded it to YouTube and directed all of his traffic to this one specific video. And the sole purpose of this video was to sell people on the idea of starting an SMMA. And because of that, he was able to make tens of millions of dollars from this one specific video. Of course, the advantage of hosting a VSL on YouTube is that you don't have the friction of someone having to click through a funnel, and those viewers are more likely to watch the entire VSL because they think it's a valuable video rather than a sales video. Now, the problem is that this will only work if you sell into an unsophisticated market. So any consumers or beginners who have no idea what a VSL is. And so the key to making a video like this that works is the framing. You cannot make it look like a VSL. It cannot feel salesy even when it is salesy. It has to feel valuable. So when it comes to the organic VSL, if it was maybe 2013, 2014, I would say that this is an amazing strategy, but now I think you're not going to get the reach that someone like Eman managed to get. The selling power is obviously extremely high because it's a VSL, and in terms of simplicity, the actual format that it might take will be similar to a talking head with slides or a diagram or something similar. So it's not necessarily the hardest piece of content to make. So this one is a difficult one, but I'm probably going to put it bang in the middle just because it's definitely not as effective as it used to be, because now more people understand what a VSL is and what it looks like. So number 11 is iPad notes. This is a very underrated one, and it's kind of another variant of the whiteboard or the live breakdown strategy, except in this case you normally have something prepared, whether it's a set of images, a diagram, or even a document on an iPad, and then the creator will pick up a pen and annotate those diagrams or those images, those screenshots, to give them more color. And these kinds of note-taking videos tend to be a bit more structured than something that's more raw, but they still have that very authentic feeling. So I'd highly recommend trying out this strategy if you want to simplify complex systems and concepts, especially if you're more of a professional and you're selling to business owners. Now, the key to making this work, however, is often using multiple shots. So in some cases, such as Ravi or Charlie, there isn't necessarily too many shots, but with other channels that also do better organically, we see a bit more effort going into production value. So I think with the iPad style, the reach is very solid. Selling power can be very high, especially if you're a good speaker, and it's also pretty simple to make. It's quite easy to get someone else on your team to build out a basic structure for you to follow, and then you come in and annotate over the top whilst giving your own thoughts. And so I would say, in my opinion, this format is proven to print. Now, number 12 is a big one, the podcast or interview style. So obviously the podcast is framed as a conversation between a host and a guest, or a host and multiple guests. So I would recommend this if you're looking to hijack other audiences. So for example, you've already kind of maxed out the potential in terms of monetization on your own audience, and now you're looking to expand through paid ads and tapping into different markets with your personal brand. And the key to making the podcast work, of course, is the teaser intro. So you see this a lot on something like the Diary of a CEO, where they'll take all of the highlights, cut it up into a highlight reel, and put that before the full podcast starts to obviously build extreme anticipation and indicate some degree of a payoff if you watch the entire podcast. So when it comes to the podcast style, unless your podcast has a crazy guest on it and it has extremely high production quality, the reach is actually going to be pretty poor, especially if you're the host. The selling power of a podcast, I would argue, is relatively low. Now, it can be great for nurturing leads that are already in your pipeline because they get to see a slightly different side of you, but it's definitely not amazing for talking about your offer and the results that you get. And in terms of simplicity, if you're the host, it's not a simple thing to do. If you're the guest on someone else's podcast, then it becomes a lot easier. So if you already have a growing personal brand and you have someone who's able to clip up content from the podcast that you go on, then I would say it's definitely a cool thing to experiment with. Now, number 13 is probably my favorite on this list, and it's the review/audit strategy. So this strategy involves you as a creator or business owner reviewing other people's stuff. So ideally, these are existing clients or prospects that are maybe in your free community that you're able to audit, whether it's their business as a whole, whether it's their funnel, whether it's their content strategy, and so on. The main benefit of this is that you really get to showcase your skills and your expertise without just talking about yourself. When you apply it to someone else who's struggling, other people watch that video and compare themselves to the person that you're helping. So especially if you're someone that sells info or coaching, it provides hardcore evidence to someone that you know exactly what you're talking about and that you can help them. And that can really be the decision maker between someone buying from you and buying from someone else. So I would recommend this basically to anyone with knowledge. And the key to making this work is getting someone else on your team to prepare the material beforehand. So when it comes to the audit strategy, this kind of stuff doesn't get the craziest reach compared to other things, but the selling power is so ridiculously high that it definitely offsets it. And then it's also just so simple to make. It really doesn't need any crazy editing. It doesn't need any crazy production value. Of course, you can add that if you like, but it's such an excellent format for being able to generate leads for your business. So I'm going to put it in the top tier. So strategy 14 out of 15 is events. So this is when someone attends and speaks at an event. They get a videographer to record it and then they upload it to YouTube. Really as simple as that. Generally, it's an in-person event like a mastermind, but other times it could actually be an online event like a webinar in Serge Guattari's case. So I'd recommend this to anyone who actually speaks at events or holds their own events. And the key to making this work is to contextualize what you're going to talk about properly. And of course, actually being a good and entertaining speaker. So what I mean by contextualize is actually giving sufficient information either in the packaging of the video through the thumbnail and title or as an actual introduction, but giving enough information before someone dives into the talk itself so that they understand whether it's actually going to be valuable to them and deliver on the promises you made in the thumbnail and title. So obviously the event style is pretty situational. I would say in terms of reach, this kind of unedited event repurposing won't get too many views. Its selling power could be decent depending on what you're actually speaking about at the event or on the webinar, but it is very simple to make. So I would say it's something that you can definitely try. And the final content strategy is the My Story video. So this is almost a very specific type of VSL that will often document your transformation from A to B. So before you were famous and rich and after you were famous and rich. And in many cases, the best way to do this is in the documentary style that we mentioned before. But obviously the distinction is that the focus is really going to be on how the business model or the unique mechanism is what took you from the before state to the after state. So I would recommend this to anyone that has found significant success and sells info. So for example, this video from Brez is going to be perfect for selling people on the idea of freelance brand scaling. But if you ran an ad agency yourself, it's not really going to sign you ad agency clients. And the key to making this kind of video work is to make it emotionally charged. So if you can bring in family members, if you can talk about your rags to riches story, really get people to relate to you on an emotional level, then it's going to be extremely powerful. So a lot of the time these My Story videos, especially if done well, can get a really high reach. You see this particularly in the fitness niche where people document their physical transformation. They tend to have very high selling power because of the emotional weight behind these stories. But if you do it well, then it's generally not that simple to make. But I would say for most creators, if you've found a significant level of success, then creating a My Story video, if you sell info, is proven to print. If you want access to this whiteboard, there'll be a link in the description where you can get it for free. And if you're someone who's currently running an info business and you need help building out your brand on YouTube so that you can book more calls and close more clients purely organically, then check out the first link in the description. As always, I appreciate each and every one of you for watching the whole video, and I will see you next time.